The day the sky broke open started like any other clear blue skies stretching over the Midwest, with farmers tending to their crops, kids playing in suburban streets, and military exercises running as scheduled across bases in the desert. But then, a shadow spread across the land, a darkness that seemed to swallow the sun itself. Hundreds of miles above, alien ships tore through the atmosphere, their silver holes reflecting the light in blinding bursts. The ships hovered in formation, like giant, predatory birds, motionless, yet menacing. From the White House Situation Room to military command centers across the country, chaos erupted. Calls came in from every corner, reports of strange aircraft, cities losing power, and electromagnetic pulses frying grids coast to coast. But this was more than just an EMP attack. Satellite feeds went black. Communication lines crackled and died, and fighter jets scrambled only to fall from the sky as their systems failed. Within minutes, High Commander Zytrax made his announcement. His voice, a low, echoing timbre that seemed to come from the very air itself, spoke directly into the minds of every human being. "Humans of Earth," he began, with a tone of almost clinical condescension, "we are the Trillia, masters of the cosmos. Your world now belongs to us. Resist, and you will be annihilated. Submit, and you will live." The message played on a loop, echoing through the streets, bouncing off crumbling skyscrapers, and rippling through the darkened cities. But for all the fear it stirred, Zytrax was met with a silence that he mistook for compliance. He believed Earth's resistance would be minimal, the conquest swift. After all, his fleet had subdued planets much more advanced than this one. He ordered the first wave of landings, confident that soon, the human race would be nothing more than a footnote in the Trillia's expansion across the galaxy. On the ground, however, things looked different. Across the American Midwest, the darkened skies were split by the roaring sounds of low-flying alien craft. The Trillia dropships, sleek and jagged, touched down in fields, parking lots, and even city centers, disgorging platoons of armored soldiers. Their weapons, a strange amalgam of organic and mechanical technology, crackled with energy. Each alien soldier stood over 7 feet tall, clad in exoskeleton suits designed to intimidate as much as protect. But in their arrogance, the Trillia had failed to realize just how stubborn their new adversaries could be. While power grids lay in ruins, people were still moving. They were organizing. And as the alien soldiers marched into towns and cities, they were met with unexpected defiant civilians, throwing whatever they had at hand. Police units fighting back with bullets and batons, and soldiers, like Major Ethan Cole, rallying what remained of their units. Cole, a grizzled combat veteran stationed at a remote Nevada base, had seen strange things in his career, but nothing like this. As his base lost power and communication, he gathered his unit, urging them to hold strong. "We may be down, but we're not out," he told them. "This is our country, and I'll be damned if I let some alien bastards take it from us." Across the darkened landscape, the resistance began to take shape, even as Zytrax watched, certain that the sparks of defiance would soon be snuffed out. 2 days after the Trillia's arrival, the first serious skirmish erupted in the vast arid expanses of Nevada. Zytrax, monitoring from his command center in orbit, ordered the deployment of a heavily armed ground contingent to secure the area. Their mission: establish a base to coordinate further assaults across North America. He assumed the human forces, cut off from their communications and crippled without power, would crumble before the Trillia's might. But instead of finding a cowed populace, the alien forces were greeted by a determined resistance. Major Cole and his unit, along with a few dozen volunteers, ex-soldiers, ranchers, and even survivalists, had gathered near the targeted landing zone. Armed with whatever they could scavenge from depots and local caches, they prepared to make a stand. The desert air sizzled as the first Trillia dropships touched down. Cole watched through binoculars, studying the alien soldiers as they fanned out, moving with an almost mechanical precision. Their weapons, plasma rifles that hummed with a blue-green energy, looked otherworldly, and their armor seemed impenetrable. But Cole knew they had an advantage: knowledge of the terrain, and the element of surprise. "All right, listen up," he barked to his ragtag team. "They might have all the fancy tech, but we've got this land that's ours, and a whole lot of fight left in us. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't let them pin you down." As the Trillia began to advance, Cole's team struck first, using improvised explosives and hidden traps to disrupt their formation. A series of homemade bombs, buried beneath the desert sands, erupted beneath the aliens' feet, sending shockwaves through their ranks. Trillia soldiers, who had expected no more than token resistance, found themselves thrown into disarray. Smoke filled the air, obscuring their line of sight as bullets cut through the chaos. Cole's unit moved swiftly, using the rocky outcrops and desert shrubs for cover. Snipers took aim from hidden vantage points, targeting the joints in the Trillia exoskeletons, while others closed in, using military-grade rifles to devastating effect. It was nothing like the clean, calculated warfare that Trillia had anticipated. It was brutal, close quarters, and chaotic, everything their training had overlooked. The battle raged for hours, and for every alien that fell, another seemed to take its place. But they had made a critical error. Sitrax had underestimated how far these primitives would go to defend their home. They fought with a ferocity that the Trillia, for all their calculations and strategies, had never encountered before. Sitrax watched the unfolding battle from above, his expression darkening as reports streamed in of unexpected casualties and resistance. "Impossible," he muttered to himself, his hands clenching into fists. "How can they be doing this?" On the ground, Cole saw the shift in the alien formation, their confusion as they tried to adapt. He pressed the advantage, leading a flanking maneuver that hit the aliens where they were weakest, at their poorly defended supply depot. As the Trillia's equipment went up in flames, the aliens were forced into retreat, abandoning their plans for a base in the Nevada desert. That night, Cole and his team gathered around a campfire in the middle of a blacked-out desert. They were bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, but alive. And they had achieved something no one thought possible. They had driven the aliens back. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered in their hearts. "You see that?" Cole said, his voice rough but proud. "They bleed, just like us. And we're going to make them bleed again." The victory in Nevada wasn't decisive, but it was enough to show the world and the Trillia that the fight was far from over. In the shadows of their fleet, the seeds of resistance took root, while Zytrax, still clinging to his sense of superiority, ordered more troops to descend, convinced that he could crush this rebellion before it spread. But as the first signs of a real war emerged, one thing became clear: the Trillia's easy conquest was slipping through their fingers, and the Americans were just getting started. Weeks after the initial clashes in Nevada, the conflict between the Trillia and the American resistance escalated into a brutal, sprawling war across the United States. The aliens struck at major cities and military installations, using their advanced weapons to subdue strongholds and devastate populations. Their plasma cannons and energy shields gave them an edge in open combat, but they struggled with guerrilla tactics that leveraged the vast, rugged terrain of the country. Major Cole, now a de facto leader of the resistance, had regrouped with remnants of the U.S. Army, Marines, and civilian militias in the dense forests of Appalachia. His base, hidden deep within the misty woods, served as a nerve center for the growing rebellion. From here, he coordinated attacks, striking alien outposts, sabotaging supply lines, and gathering intelligence on the Trillia's movements. The Trillia were relentless, launching sweeping patrols through the forests and unleashing drones that scoured the canopy for human movements. Yet, every time they closed in on the Resistance's hideouts, they found nothing but empty trails, traps, and diversions. Cole's forces became ghosts in the woods, blending with the terrain and striking like a storm before vanishing back into the shadows. The turning point came during an intense confrontation near a valley known as Whispering Hollow, where the Trillia had established a command center. This outpost was critical to their efforts. Its communication arrays allowed them to coordinate with their ships in orbit and direct their troops on the ground. If Cole could take it out, the aliens' grip on the region would be weakened, giving the resistance a chance to push them further back. Cole gathered his team, a mix of battle-hardened Marines, locals with knowledge of the land, and even a few hackers, who had managed to piece together a makeshift communication system. His plan was simple, but risky. Draw the aliens into the valley, use the terrain to their advantage, and cut off their retreat. Under the cover of night, they moved silently through the underbrush, setting charges along the main trails and positioning snipers on the high ridges overlooking the valley. As dawn broke, Cole's team launched their attack, hitting the outer defenses of the Trillia outpost with a barrage of gunfire and makeshift mortar. The Trillia responded with a full deployment, sending their troops into the valley to crush the human attackers. But Cole had planned for this. As the aliens advanced, his team detonated the charges, collapsing the valley's edges and funneling the Trillia into a narrow choke point. From the ridges above, snipers picked off alien soldiers, while hidden machine gun nests unleashed a torrent of bullets. The battle was fierce and chaotic, with plasma beams slicing through the trees and explosions rocking the valley floor. Yet, the Trillia found themselves trapped, unable to maneuver or call for reinforcements. Their communication arrays, now vulnerable, became targets for Cole's hackers, who jammed their signals and fed false information to their commanders. With their lines in disarray, the Trillia's forces crumbled under the relentless assault. Cole led the final charge into the heart of the outpost, taking down the remaining alien soldiers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. As he stood among the ruins of the alien command center, he saw the shock and disbelief in the eyes of the surviving Trillia, who could not comprehend how their superior force had been bested by what they considered mere savages. The victory at Whispering Hollow reverberated through the resistance. For the first time, the Americans had not just survived, they had dealt a significant blow to their alien occupiers. News of the victory spread quickly, inspiring other pockets of resistance across the country to rise up and fight back. From his orbiting command ship, Zytrax watched in frustration as his forces struggled to regain control. The humans had adapted in ways he had not anticipated, turning their weaknesses into strengths. He ordered reinforcements to the region, but now he knew he faced a true enemy, one who would not break easily. Yet, even as he prepared for the next assault, Zytrax could not shake the creeping doubt that whispered in the back of his mind. What if we have misjudged these humans after all? The war ground on, dragging the Trillia deeper into a quagmire they had never expected. Their supply lines, stretched thin across a hostile planet, struggled to keep up with the demands of a prolonged conflict. Their machinery, so advanced that it had conquered countless worlds, began to malfunction in Earth's diverse environment's plasma rifles that overheated in the humidity of the south, exoskeletons that jammed in the snow-dusted mountains of the Rockies. In the mountains of Colorado, Major Cole convened a secret meeting of resistance leaders. They gathered in an old Cold War-era bunker hidden beneath a mountain peak, a relic of past conflicts that had once prepared for nuclear war, but now served as the headquarters of Earth's last hope. Among those present were former Navy SEALs, guerrilla fighters from the cities, hackers who had restored makeshift communication lines, and even a few alien defectors Trillia soldiers who had grown disillusioned with the bloodshed. Cole stood before them, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with determination. A map of the United States lay spread out on the table, covered in markings of alien bases, human resistance camps, and strategic points. "We've got them on the ropes," he said, his voice rough but steady. "But we can't let up. Every time they lose a base, they hit back harder. We need to take this fight to them, cut them off, drive them out." The plan that emerged was audacious. They would launch a series of coordinated attacks on key Trillia installations, fuel depots, communication centers, and the bases that served as their footholds across the country. The goal was not just to inflict damage, but to stretch the Trillia's forces to the breaking point, forcing them to spread thin and making them vulnerable to a decisive strike. The resistance moved swiftly, striking with precision and disappearing before the Trillia could regroup. In Florida's swamps, they ambushed supply convoys, dragging alien transports into the murky waters. In the ruins of Chicago, urban fighters turned skyscrapers into sniper nests, raining fire down on Trillia patrols. And in the vast plains of Texas, they used old military drones, refitted and repurposed, to conduct surprise airstrikes on alien bases. The Trillia, accustomed to wars of conquest that ended swiftly, found themselves struggling against this unpredictable and unrelenting enemy. Their troops, designed for overwhelming force, faltered in the face of a war that demanded patience and adaptability. Their commanders, who had once seen Earth as a simple prize, now faced a nightmare of attrition and guerrilla warfare. Meanwhile, Zytrax's frustration boiled over. He convened his own war council in the command ship, its sterile chambers lit by the glow of holographic displays showing the Earth below. He paced back and forth as his generals reported on the latest losses, his voice growing sharper with every setback. "We are the Trillia. We have never been defeated by such inferior beings. How is it possible that these humans, these primitives, continue to defy us?" One of his advisors, a Trillia scientist named Elok, dared to speak the truth. "Perhaps, High Commander, it is not their weapons or their technology that we have misjudged. It is their spirit. They fight as if they have nothing left to lose." Zytrax dismissed the comment with a snarl, but the words lingered in his mind like a poison. He ordered his forces to increase their brutality, targeting civilian centers in an attempt to break the will of the resistance. Cities were bombarded, fields scorched, and entire towns disappeared in flashes of alien energy. But instead of cowing the humans, it only hardened their resolve. The resistance grew stronger, bolstered by survivors who now had nothing but vengeance in their hearts. They fought for their fallen, for the homes they had lost, and for the freedom they refused to surrender. Each day brought new recruits, new allies, and new victories, as the tide of the war began to shift. Deep in the Colorado bunker, Cole received reports of successful raids with grim satisfaction. He knew they had made progress, but he also knew that Zytrax was desperate. The next battle, he sensed, would be the most dangerous yet a final test of wills that would determine the fate of their world. As the first snows began to fall on the mountains, blanketing the hidden bunker in a veil of white, the resistance prepared for the assault that would define their future. And in the silence of the mountain air, Cole prayed that their newfound strength would be enough to face what was coming. The war had stretched on for months, turning the landscapes of the United States into a battleground. Despite the devastation, the human spirit burned bright. The resistance had grown into a formidable force, striking fear into the hearts of the Trillia. High Commander Zytrax, now desperate, focused on his last stronghold, a fortified base on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. He planned to lure the humans into a trap and crush them with a final strike. Major Cole and his forces had other plans. Gathering resistance fighters from across the country, they prepared a massive assault. In the pre-dawn darkness, armored vehicles and fighter jets moved toward the alien base, while ground troops advanced through the ruined streets. Plasma blasts lit the sky, but this time, the Americans were ready. The battle was brutal. Cole's forces pressed through the chaos, using guerrilla tactics to dismantle alien defenses. Inside the base, Zytrax prepared to unleash a devastating super weapon pulse generator that would annihilate everything within a 100-mile radius. But a team of human engineers, led by Ramirez, infiltrated the base and sabotaged the generator. As the generator overloaded, Cole ordered a retreat. The pulse backfired, turning the alien base into a blazing crater and consuming Zytrax and his command. Leaderless and disoriented, the remaining Trillia soldiers fled to their dropships, abandoning the fight. The alien fleet broke apart, retreating back into the depths of space. Cole and his men gathered among the ruins, battered but victorious. The Resistance's sacrifices had driven the invaders out, reclaiming their world. In the aftermath, survivors emerged from hiding to rebuild. They knew the Trillia might one day return, but this time, Earth would be ready. The story of their victory spread as a legend, a symbol of the strength that comes not just from weapons, but from an unbreakable spirit. As the dawn broke over a new day, Cole allowed himself a small smile, remembering Zytrax's disbelief. The aliens had never understood what they were truly up against, the determination of a people who refused to surrender. And with that, Earth began to heal, scarred but free, ready to face whatever might come next.